Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, guys. So what I have for you guys today is episode number 21 of the Championship Roundup, guys. So in this video today, we're going to be going over all the Championship matches that took place this weekend, guys. And I'm going to be giving you guys my opinions on what I thought of all the games taking place. But what I'm really interested to know is what you guys have to say. So in the comments down below, I want you guys to leave a comment on how your team performed this weekend and any other talking points that we bring up throughout the video. I'd be very interested to know what you guys had to say about this one, because this was a pretty hectic week of the Championship. We had quite a lot of things going on. We had a lot of games with some big scorelines. We had some local derbies going on this week as well. And once again, we have some transfer sagas which just seem to be raging on for the entirety of it. So this should be an interesting one. But just before we get into any of the games, guys, I will include your comments on screen now. So if any of you guys did successfully manage to predict any of the scorelines taking place this weekend, I will include your comment on screen now. So fair play to everyone who did successfully manage to get a prediction right this week. I think I'm not actually sure, I definitely got at least one right this week. I definitely predicted the Nottingham Forest against Bristol City scoreline. I said that one would be 1-0 to Forest. In the end, it was just that. So I'll take that for myself this week. But enough of me rambling on, we'll just get into the game. So our first game, guys, was the game taking place on Friday night between Brighton and Sheffield Wednesday. And going into this one, this was a massive game at the top of the table. You know, for either of these sides to go ahead and pick up 3 points would have been massive for them. And of course, Brighton in the end managed to walk away with a 2-1 victory. However, I couldn't help feel a little bit disappointed with how Sheffield Wednesday performed in this game. I mean, going in at half-time, this one was at 1-1 at half-time, thanks to a knockout and a dunk goal. But in the second half, when Sheffield Wednesday got that penalty thanks to a Glenn Murray handball, Brighton were then down to 10 men. They missed a penalty, and I felt that was like the game-changing moment in the match, to be completely honest, because Sheffield Wednesday missing that penalty, I was quite disappointed with them afterwards, really, because I felt like going up against the 10 men of Brighton, they should have taken the game more to them, really, and perhaps killed the game off sooner than they did. Of course, they didn't in the end, but Knockout in the end managed to go ahead and get another goal in this match, managed to make it 2-1 for them, and at times in this game, he was just unplayable. He was absolutely fantastic in this game, and in the end, Sheffield Wednesday went on to get 2 red cards in this one for both Fletcher and Hutchinson. So a very disappointing one for Sheffield Wednesday indeed, with some dodgy defending as well. And then for our next game, guys, we had a local derby taking place between Queen's Park Rangers and Fulham. And in the end, this one managed to finish all square with a 1-1 draw taking place. Now, I don't really think a draw would have done either of these sides too many favours, especially not Fulham, who are really knocking on the door for to get the playoffs at the end of the season. I think a victory against Queen's Park Rangers would have done just the overall group massive things, really, in terms of, you know, getting a local derby win. That would have lifted morale up a lot, but it wasn't a great start for Fulham. Of course, they were given a penalty in this game, and I just don't know how that was a penalty. I just really don't know. It was one of the softest penalties I've ever seen, but I suppose justice was done with Chris Martin actually stepping up and missing that penalty. Alex Smithies, once again, I think he saved something like 6 out of 10 penalties or something crazy like that. So fair play to him. He has been just a fantastic player for QPR this season. But in the end, Chris Martin did manage to get a goal as the game did finish all square, and probably the fair result in the end. And then for our next fixture, guys, we had Aston Villa, who came up against my club, Preston North End. So for this game, this was sort of like the classic game of two halves, in my opinion, because in the first half, Preston were just nowhere near at it, and Aston Villa really did take the game to Preston. However, I can't help but feel like Aston Villa were aided by a very dodgy refereeing decision for this one. I mean, the penalty that Aston Villa were given for a tackle that McGeady made, he clearly got the ball, and it was just a little bit frustrating, really, because it wasn't a penalty. But going in at half-time at 2-0, Preston were probably a little bit fortunate that it was only 2-0 in this game. Villa did look very impressive, but in the second half was just a total contrast to that. Aston Villa just didn't look like the same team, and Preston really did start taking the game to Aston Villa, and a fantastic goal by Jordan Hugill, a solo effort from him. He's been under quite a bit of pressure lately from a lot of Preston North End fans, as a bid from Ipswich Town has of course come in recently, which Preston rejected, and this is why I'm glad we did reject it. You know, he may not be the best finisher, but what he's shown in this game is just what he can offer when he is on top form to us. So 2 fantastic goals from Hugill, manages to turn the game around and make it 2-2. So a fantastic, you know, point for Preston in the end to come back from 2-0 down. I was very impressed with that. I'm very happy to get that performance as well in the second half. But of course, Aston Villa, let me know down below, Aston Villa fans, what you thought of Henry Lansbury. Of course, this was being his first performance today. Be quite interested to know. And then going into our next game, guys, we have Blackburn Rovers, who are coming up against Birmingham City. So this was probably one of the matches where, once again, a point for either of these sides wasn't really needed for any of them, really. I mean, Blackburn really did need the victory to go ahead and lift them out the relegation zone, whereas Birmingham really needed a victory, you know. Zola still chasing that first victory as Birmingham City boss. It's just been an awful run of form since he has come into the club, and going into this one, I think I was actually backing the Blackburn victory in this one, and they were quite close to doing that. They were knocking on the door towards the end of the match, but in terms of Blackburn, they didn't get off to the best start. After just 3 minutes, they were 1-0 behind thanks to a Jukovic penalty, but they managed to level it up just before half-time with Danny Graham equalising for them. But like I said, this victory now leaves Blackburn in the relegation zone once again, and I just, you need to, when you're looking over the Blackburn fixtures, these are the sort of games which, coming up against a side like Birmingham, who aren't in a good run of form, these are the games which they need to be turning into wins, and Birmingham, just nothing seems to be going for them at the moment. And then for our next game, guys, we have Cardiff City, who came up against Burton Albion. So for this one, Cardiff managed to grab a last-minute winner, and in all honesty, it was a little bit harsh on Burton Albion, really. Of course, they put in a performance in this one to try and get something from the game, and a point maybe have been a fair result in the end for this one, but Cardiff kept plugging away, especially towards the end of this one, and of course managed to reap the benefits of that. And this victory for Cardiff has actually lifted them, I'd say, comfortably above the relegation zone now. You know, when Neil Warnock walked into the Cardiff City job, I think they were in the relegation zone, but since then they've, you know, been able to show that they should be a comfortable mid-table side this season. Cardiff, I don't see them going down, and I think when I did my last video about you guys making your predictions for the end of the season, I don't think I saw anyone saying Cardiff would go down, but the same can't be said, however, for Burton Albion, who are now in the relegation zone, and thanks to other results not going their way, and this one, of course, not going their way either. And with Burton Albion, you know, it's just a question of, does anyone think that Burton will actually get out of this at this point in time? Because towards the start of the season, it seemed to be their home form which was keeping them just above relegation, but even since then, that home form seems to have deteriorated a little bit, and once again, on the road, they've not been great, so it's worrying times for Burton at the moment. And then for our next game, guys, we had a massive clash at the top of the table, guys, with two promotion chasers going up ahead of each other. In this one, we had Derby County, who came up against Reading, and in the end, this was actually a cracker of a match, with Derby, in the end, managing to walk away with a 3-2 victory over Reading. So for this one, Reading actually got off to a very good start in this game, and we're actually looking pretty decent at the start of it. I'm not going to lie about that. It was John Swift who took the lead for Reading, obviously been a decent player for them so far this season, but it actually finished at the end of the first half as a 1-1, and towards the second half, Derby seemed to up the tempo a little bit. In the first half, they weren't really on it in the first half, really, and this was actually a big game for Reading, actually, because now this sort of sums up they're not on a good run of form. They've actually lost their last 3 matches, if you include the match they had in the Cup against Manchester United, so they've got a game midweek, which has been a rearranged fixture, so that could be a massive one in getting Reading's season, you know, back on track, really, because it wasn't too long ago since Reading were looking above them at teams like Brighton and Newcastle, where they weren't too far behind them not too long ago, but now with a recent dodgy bit of form with the defeats to QPR and now Derby, they really are seem to be looking over their shoulders for the teams chasing promotion just behind them. But Derby, this was actually a very important victory for them. You know, they were coming off the back of the defeat they had last time out against Leeds United, so a home victory against Reading will do massive things for them, you know, going forward this season. And once again, Tom Ince seemed to be the star man of this game, as he looks to be back on form for them. And then for our next game, guys, we had Huddersfield Town, who came up against Ipswich Town, and in the end, it was just really a textbook performance from Huddersfield, who managed to brush away Ipswich with a 2-0 victory. And I'm going to say Izzy Brown with a goal in this game, a fantastic finish from him in that one. I think that's his first goal he's scored now for Huddersfield, so fair play to him. Of course, a recent signing on loan in this window, but fair play to him. He's managed to grab a good goal in this game. And I think what can be said for Huddersfield recently is, really, I think Huddersfield have been getting decent results, but they've not really had too many outstanding performances to be proud of, really. But I thought in this game, Huddersfield actually put in a very decent performance in this one, so fair play to them. You know, not only did they get the result, but the performance, you know, was there to go alongside it. But maybe a bit of that can be contributed to Ipswich Town. Of course, they're really not on a good run of form at this point in time. You know, of course, they got knocked out of the FA Cup to Lincoln, and Mick McCarthy, you know, there's a lot of frustration around him with Ipswich, and understandably so. I think that there's a lot that needs to be done with this Ipswich squad, you know, preferably in this transfer window, but it doesn't really seem like too much is going to be getting done in this transfer window with Ipswich. Of course, it was quite precedented that they had a bid rejected for the Preston striker Jordan Hugill, and they just seem to be lacking in areas of this pitch, and this Ipswich squad just needs to be freshened up a little bit. But fair play to Huddersfield Town. This was a fantastic victory to them, which actually lifts them to 3rd in the Championship. So a very nice run of form at this point in time for Huddersfield, and it should be playoffs at the end of the season, bearing any slip-ups. For the next game, guys, we had Newcastle United, who came up against Rotherham United, and for this one, there wasn't any shocks to be expected in this one, really. It was that classic sort of game. It was top of the table, coming up against bottom of the table, and in the end, Newcastle managed to walk away with a 4-0 victory over Rotherham. But I was actually very interested to see how Newcastle would actually go about playing, because, of course, they have got Dwight Gale out injured at this point in time, so maybe I would like to see Newcastle come up against maybe a bit more fearsome opposition to see how they would cope without Gale. But at this point in time, Murphy seems to be in a fantastic run of form. I think he's got 2 goals now in his last 2 games. And when Newcastle signed Murphy, I was a bit puzzled really by that transfer, because I didn't really see him getting too many opportunities. But now that he finally has been given that opportunity at Newcastle, with of course Gale injured and Mitrovic not really seeming to be the man for Newcastle at this point in time, he has grasped that opportunity with 2 hands. So fair play to him, man. In the first half, Rotherham managed to do quite well to keep Newcastle at bay, and the goals I felt for Newcastle did come at the right time for them, really just to see off this Rotherham side. Of course, they got a goal just before half-time, and then they got a goal just after half-time, and really that was enough to see off this Rotherham side, who wouldn't really be able to offer too much going forward. But I've got to give a shout out in this game to Carl Darlow. What a save he made in this game. And then for our next game, guys, we had Norwich City, who came up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. So for this one, of course, it was Paul Lambert returning to his former side in Norwich City, and in the end, Norwich actually managed to walk away with a very impressive 3-1 victory over Wolves. And I've got to say, I wasn't expecting this one, you know. Going into this game, I was expecting Wolves to go ahead and get a victory. Of course, I was expecting their squad to be brewing with confidence, really, after that impressive result they got last time out against Aston Villa. But Norwich actually managed to, I don't know, Norwich fans, what do you think of this result, really? Do you think it's sort of papering over the cracks for what has been a very poor season for you guys this year? Or do you think this could possibly be a catalyst in you guys pushing for a playoff place come the end of the season? Because, of course, it wasn't too long ago where Norwich were on just an awful run of form, but with this victory, you're only 5 points off the playoffs. So really, I know there's a lot of other teams going for the playoffs who are in a much better position than Norwich at this point in time in the season. But Norwich fans, do you think you've got maybe an outside chance of actually getting the playoffs this season? Let me know down below. I'd be very interested to know what you guys had to say. But a game-changing point in this game really was the penalty that Norwich got and the Carl Akimi red card as well. I think they were forced to put in, I think it was Doherty in goal for Wolverhampton Wanderers, which of course it wasn't going to help out for them, you know. Akimi definitely could have avoided the red card, you know. He didn't need to react in the way that he did, but in the end, that's just how it's gone down, and Norwich have got the win. And then for our next game, guys, we had Nottingham Forest, who came up against Bristol City, where Nottingham Forest managed to walk away with an impressive 1-0 victory over struggling Bristol City. So this game really was overshadowed, really, by the protests going on before the game at Nottingham Forest for the protests against their owners, Fawaz. And fair play to Nottingham Forest, you know, it's not a situation which any football fan, you know, likes to see, really, with poor ownership of a club. And we've seen what it's done to Nottingham Forest over the past few years, and of course this season just typifying that, really. But you know, fair play to Nottingham Forest for doing that protest. I think everyone, you know, it's never a nice thing to say in football. But in terms of Bristol City in this game, that is now 8 consecutive defeats for them in this season. And I asked this question, I think, 2 weeks ago to Bristol City fans as to what your current stance was with your manager, Lee Johnson. And when they asked, you know, I think it was then when you had 6 defeats on the bounce, when they asked Bristol City fans then, in the comments down below, I probably had like a 50-50 split for fans wanting to keep him and fans wanting to sack him. So I'd be very interested to know if any of your guys' opinions has actually now changed with Lee Johnson, and whether you have now had enough with him, because do you see him turning this around, really? I mean, 8 consecutive defeats is just absolutely shambolic, really. And I don't know, can you point fingers at the squad? Because when I'm looking through that squad, it's a talented bunch of players, you know. You've got players in there like Tammy Abraham, Lee Tomlin, Luke Freeman, Bailey Wright now, Aidan Flint. You've got a very good team in there, so who's to blame? Let me know down below. But I've also got to give a shout out to Ben Osborne's goal in this game. What a finish it was. If you've not seen this goal, make sure you go check it out, because it was from a free kick. He sort of chipped it up, then launched it into the top corner. Fantastic goal from him. Then for our next game, guys, we have Wigan Athletic, who came up against Brentford, where Wigan managed to walk away with a very impressive 2-1 victory over Brentford. So Sam Morsey had a very good game in this one. I think he got a goal in this one, probably the standout performer from this game, and that's now actually 3 wins on the bounce for Wigan, and that run of form has actually lifted them out of the relegation zone. So Wigan Athletic fans, do you think that this squad you currently have at this point in time has enough to stay up now? Because, you know, if your recent performances are anything to go by, it really is looking quite encouraging now for Wigan, despite, you know, all the doom and gloom they've seen throughout the majority of this season. But for Brentford, it was a very frustrating one. Scott Hogan was not in the squad for this match. Of course, their manager came out after the match and explained why that was. He had a tight hamstring, and with, of course, other teams bidding for Scott Hogan, they didn't want to risk playing him. So it is looking very likely now that Scott Hogan will be leaving Brentford sooner rather than later. So and with how the performances have suffered a little bit recently without Scott Hogan, how do you think you'll cope without him? And then for our last game, guys, we had a local derby taking place between Barnsley and Leeds United, where Barnsley managed to walk away with a very impressive 3-2 victory over Leeds United. So going into this game, Leeds United were on a fantastic run of form, and I was predicting a Leeds United victory because I wasn't really sure where the mentality of this Barnsley squad would be at, really. But I've got to say, I was blown away by how good they were in this game. You know, they outplayed Leeds, and I think it was the right result in the end. And, you know, I think a lot of people wouldn't have been blamed to be back in the Leeds victory for this one. Of course, with Barnsley recently losing their top scorer, Sam Winnall, they've got their captain, Conor Hurahan, who looks to be on his way out. But I've got to give a lot of praise to him as well, because for him to captain this side and go out against Leeds United, it would be very easy for him to not really put in a performance. Of course, with Villa after him, he didn't really need to put in a good performance like that, but he felt like he owed it to Barnsley to put in, you know, maybe that will be his parting gift with that free kick he scored. It was a very good free kick at that as well, but Barnsley, fair play to them. This was a fantastic victory, and once again, just showed really the mentality of how good this Barnsley squad actually can be at times, whereas Leeds United were left frustrated because Chris Wood managing to pick up 2 goals just wasn't enough for them in the end. So there you have it, guys. That will wrap it up for this episode of the Championship Roundup. So make sure you do leave a like if you have enjoyed this video, guys. It is always massively appreciated. So now for my goal of the weekend, for this one, I'm going to give it to Ben Osborne. Of course, there were a lot of contenders for this game. I mean, there was a Jordan Hugill fantastic goal. There was Conor Hurahan's goal. There was Izzy Brown's goal. But I'm going to give it to Ben Osborne. I just felt like that free kick was absolutely exceptional. So I'm going to give it to him. And then for my result of the weekend, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Barnsley, getting that Derby Day victory. Like I just said, you know, everything they were going up against with their players seeming to be leaving the club, just the spirit they put in for this game and the overall performance they put in for it as well. My result of the weekend is going to be Barnsley for beating Leeds United by 3-2. So there you have it, guys. That will now wrap it up for this episode of the Championship Roundup. So thank you so much for watching. So as well as that, make sure you go ahead and check out all the other links in the description down below. Make sure you follow me on Twitter as well, as I always tweet before I upload the video. Therefore, you'll never miss a video ever again, guys. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.